Safe. By Orphaned Account on AO3. Episode 5. Chapter 5. They both sipped their coffee. The honey did help Hitoshi's throat. It was still weird, though. Aizawa was typing something on his computer. Hitoshi stared. "What are you working on?" Hitoshi asked. "We're starting on a report on your foster family." "You don't need to do that." Aizawa gave him a look over the computer. They sat in silence before Aizawa spoke up. "How do you feel about answering some questions? It doesn't have to be now." "It doesn't matter. The answer won't change." Aizawa nodded and clicked around his computer. "How about we take turns asking questions? I'm sure you're curious about all this." Hitoshi nodded. "All right. Do you want to start?" Aizawa said. "What's the story behind you and Mike-sensei?" "We were friends in high school. After we graduated, I tried to ditch him. He didn't let me. The rest is history." He paused. "The questions I have aren't going to be fun, kid. I'm sorry." "It's fine. Nothing I haven't been asked before." "You're mature enough that I'll skip straight to the point. Who's hitting you?" Hitoshi kept his voice a strict neutral. "Mr. Kaneko." "Only him?" "Yeah, Mrs. Kaneko usually preferred." He sneered. "Other methods?" Hitoshi looked down at the table, his neutral face already slipping into anger. Aizawa watched him, analyzing his reaction. They sat in silence for a moment, before Hitoshi asked his next question. "What's going to happen to the other kids?" "The other kids in your foster home?" "Yeah. They're probably going to be moved into different foster homes. It sucks, but it's the general procedure. I'm sure you already know that, though." Hitoshi nodded. He cleared his throat again. He spoke carefully. "Can I get some more water?" "Of course you could, kid. You don't have to ask." Hitoshi stood up and got more water from the tap. "What made you feel like you had to?" Aizawa said, watching Hitoshi at the sink. "It's rude to take something without asking." Something about the way he said it seemed rehearsed. Aizawa hummed, then spoke. "You shouldn't have to ask for tap water." Hitoshi shrugged and sat back down with his glass. "Are you up for another question?" Aizawa asked. He shrugged again. "Sure." "Can you talk me through on what you eat in a typical day? More specifically, how your meals are provided." "If the Kamikos aren't in the kitchen, then I could steal something from the pantry. If they are, then I have to eat something from the stash I had in my room. I can usually hold out till lunch, though." Aizawa grimaced, but let him keep talking. "I eat lunch in the cafeteria, then I eat dinner with you." "What about before we start getting dinner?" "I'd have to find something for myself at home. I'd usually be able to steal some leftovers from whatever the Kimikos cooked." He continued, bitterly. They only cooked for the younger kids. He paused to drink some water and clear his throat before he asked his question. "Will I still be able to go to UA?" Aizawa didn't hesitate to answer. "Yes, I'll make sure of it." He paused. "I have one more question to ask you. If you don't feel comfortable answering, you don't have to. I have more than enough evidence to make a report." "Okay." "Did they do anything else to hurt you or the other children?" Hitoshi took in a shaky breath. "Yes." "What did they do?" "They would lock us in the broom closet if we broke a rule. It wasn't too bad. There was enough room to stretch your legs, but for some kids like me, we had different punishments." Aizawa made sure to keep his voice level. He was livid, but didn't want Hitoshi to think he was in trouble. "Kids like you?" Hitoshi cleared his throat again. It was mainly to stall. "Problem children, or kids with dangerous quirks?" "I qualify as both. Always the overachiever, I guess." Hitoshi was quickly losing his neutral facade. Talking about the punishments brought up feelings he didn't like to think about. Just pack them away. You could deal with them later, when you're alone. "What were the different punishments?" I... It'll be easier if I show you. I'll be right back." Hitoshi stood up and walked in the direction of the guest room. Aizawa stayed at the table, sighing. He put his head in his hands. "Jesus, Why didn't I see this sooner? I knew something was wrong. Why didn't I put the pieces together? He heard Hitoshi walking back, so he took his head out of his hands, shifting his attention to the door. The kid walked in with something in his hands, some kind of black fabric. I figured if you need evidence, this is as good as it gets. He handed the thing over to Aizawa. Hitoshi, is this a muzzle? He sounded horrified. Hitoshi shrunk in on himself as he tried to explain. I'm not allowed to ask questions there. If I do... He gestured to the muzzle. Aizawa examines the muzzle, turning it over his hands. There was dried blood on the edges, where it dug into Hitoshi's face. Seeing his teacher's horrified face, he tried to reassure, to fix the situation. It's fine, really. I'm good at keeping quiet, so they hardly had to use it. Sometimes they still made me wear it, for their safety. The more he spoke, the more he started to break. Thinking about the muzzle brought back memories, things he tried best not to think about. There had been a stretch of time, right after he had moved into the conical house, where he had been forced to wear the muzzle all day and all night. The only time he was allowed to take it off was to eat, and that was only twice a day. When he was finally allowed to take it off, 3 weeks later, he was honestly scared that it would leave permanent marks on his face. Luckily, they had faded over time. They could only really see them now if you knew what you were looking for. He stood there, in front of his teacher, shaking. He was trying to hold back his tears. It wasn't working. Aizawa's head snapped up to a choked sob from in front of him. Hitoshi was curled in on himself, clearly trying to stop crying. He stood up slowly, bending his knees a little so he was at eye level with the kid. Hitoshi. He gently reached out and put a hand on Hitoshi's shoulder. The kid hiccuped and let out a quiet sob, but leaned into the touch. When he spoke again, it was soft. Come here, kid. He gave him plenty of time to back out. He gently pulled Hitoshi into a hug. As soon as Hitoshi was against his chest, he latched onto Aizawa, hands clutched at the back of his shirt. He was so clearly trying to make himself stop crying. It's okay, kid. Let it out. Quiet sobs were muffled by his shoulder. He started rubbing circles on Hitoshi's back. Shit, kid. I'm so sorry. He whispered what he hoped were comforting words as Hitoshi cried. Eventually, the sobs died down into sniffling. Hitoshi lifted his head from its place on Aizawa's shoulder, and he looked at the ground. Aizawa picked up the glass of water on the table and handed it to him. Feeling better? Hitoshi's voice sounded as wrecked as he looked. Yeah, sorry about that. Don't apologize, kid. The two went quiet, while Hitoshi drank the rest of his water. Can I ask another question? Hitoshi asked. Of course. What's going to happen to me? Where am I going to go? That's a discussion that I'm sure Hizashi wants to be a part of. But I can tell you a little bit. You have options. We can ask Nesu about getting you a place to live on your own on the UA campus. Or Hizashi and I could help you find a new foster family. And trust me, kid, it won't be anything like the Kimiko's. We'll make sure of that. Hitoshi nodded, thinking the options over. There's also another option. Hizashi and I are registered foster parents. If you wanted, we could foster you. Wouldn't you have to talk to Mike about that first? We already have. We both love to have you, but we won't force you into anything. Hitoshi nodded. Can I? Can you what? Live with you. Are you sure, kid? You don't have to decide anything right now. If those are my only options, that's the one I want. Hizashi was going to call in the morning to get the paperwork started. I'll let him know we don't have to worry about convincing you to live with us. They were already getting to the paperwork? Do you want to go back to bed? Aizawa asked. Not really. I don't feel tired. It was a lie, but Aizawa didn't need to know that. I'm going to bring my work into the living room. It's more comfortable. You're welcome to join me and watch TV or something. Aizawa picked up his computer and walked into the living room. Hitoshi followed closely behind. They sat next to each other on the couch. Hitoshi turned the TV on to some science fiction movie, and Aizawa started typing on his computer. It only took 10 minutes for Hitoshi to fall back asleep, head landing on his teacher's shoulder. He could have sworn he felt a hand ruffle his hair as he lost consciousness. Wow. Okay. So, sorry. Okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. Did I say wow and okay? I'm not sure if I said wow and okay. I keep saying, okay. I don't have much to say in this one, other than, obviously that was very emotional. We had a very emotional chapter. I wish it was a little more spaced out. Obviously, I feel like this whole fic would benefit from adding more. This is always a comment that I have in almost all fics. I feel like it would benefit for a little bit lengthier of time, if I'm being honest. I'm more of a person that like to see things paced a little bit slower. I like my slow burns. It can't be too slow burn though. I get it. I don't know how the fuck I survived The Way You Used to Do by Emma. That shit was a slow burn, and I mean slow. That shit was slow. That was a slow cooker. That shit was burning up for 5 days. And still, it wasn't boiling. Like, that shit was slow. Slow as motherfuck. Not that type of slow burn, but like a little slow burn, right? I don't mean like too slow. I don't mean like, it has to be the right pacing. But this was a really cute chapter, and I'm guessing we're gonna get a lot more family bonding. So I'm looking forward for that, and I hope you guys are too. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe.